Former Prince Andrew, seen in these photos kneeling over an unidentified woman.
The Justice Department mistakenly published personal details and unredacted photos of dozens of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse.
I found my own date of birth, my own phone number.
From WNYC in New York, this is On the Media. I'm Brooke Gladstone. For a reporter who's been on Epstein's trail for years, the quest for accountability goes on.
There are huge pages of redactions, but there is evidence of corruption.
Also this week, the battle over an old statue of a conquistador in San Juan raises questions about who should represent Puerto Rico.
There was an empty pedestal just sitting there and a pantheon of heroes to fill it. And yet, the government insisted it should be Ponce de Leon up there.
It's all coming up after this. From WNYC in New York, this is On the Media. Micah Lowenger's out this week on a reporting trip. I'm Brooke Gladstone. Last week, the Justice Department released the latest batch of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal case.
It took a law passed with near-unanimous support in Congress to finally bring these documents to light.
Today we are producing more than 3 million pages, including more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images.
Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, formerly President Trump's personal attorney, announcing the release of the documents in compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
A rigorous process was undertaken to protect victims against any clearly unwarranted invasion of their personal privacy.
Clearly not rigorous enough.
I found my own date of birth, my own phone number.
Epstein survivor Annie Farmer speaking on NBC.
But was also just really disturbed to see evidence of names of people that I knew did not want to be public.
There are also pictures.
Former Prince Andrew, seen in these photos kneeling over an unidentified woman.
The Justice Department says it's been working to take down the files with personal details about Epstein's survivors. Just a reminder, after serially trafficking and abusing girls and young women over the course of at least 2 decades, the DOJ says he harmed over 1,000 victims. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in 2019. He died in prison shortly thereafter. The feds ruled it a suicide. Ghislaine Maxwell, his girlfriend and accomplice, remains in prison, serving a 20-year sentence. Meanwhile, the list of powerful men implicated in Epstein's files continues to grow.
Like Elon Musk, who seemingly planned visits to Epstein's island, and Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick.
Another very prominent person caught up in all this is Bill Gates.
The DOJ also posted, then temporarily removed without explanation, a spreadsheet of complaints made to the FBI, including unverified allegations about both President Trump and former President Bill Clinton.
This week, we learned that Bill and Hillary Clinton will provide testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee. It's all part of a broader push to learn, nearly 7 years after Epstein's arrest and death, what was never learned at the time. Who were his co-conspirators, and how he was allowed to get away with such widespread abuse for so long.
We're learning new things every day.
Julie K. Brown is an investigative journalist at the Miami Herald and author of the substack, The Epstein Files by Julie K. Brown, where she is continually covering the story. Her series of articles in 2018 revived Epstein's cold case and led to his arrest. She's thrilled the papers have been released, not so delighted with the pattern of redactions. The wrong people are being exposed, and the wrong people are being protected.
That is really not what was supposed to happen. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was passed with the purpose of the public being able to see how Epstein got away with these crimes for so many years. And a big piece of that is the interactions between the prosecutors back in 2007 and Epstein and his lawyers, and the trajectory of how did they come up with this lenient plea deal. And we can't see because the names of all the prosecutors, it's almost all of them redacted. They basically let him off the hook in Florida.
Basically off the hook, but he was charged with something, right?
Yeah, he was charged with solicitation of a minor for prostitution. And he did serve a year in the county jail, but he wasn't in the county jail because he got work release and he spent all day in his office. Later, we found out that he was even having young women come into his office so that he could have sex. So it wasn't much of a sentence. And to be honest with you, the charges that he would have faced would have put him in prison for life. So when we say he got off, considering that at the time they knew that he had raped about 40 girls.
There were grand jury transcripts, hundreds of pages of testimony that Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta provided in 2019 to DOJ investigators. And it was Acosta who helped create that really lenient deal. So what else did you learn about Acosta?
Well, we know that Acosta was then appointed as labor secretary under Donald Trump, and there's quite a bit of documents in here about an investigation by the Justice Department, and Acosta was questioned by these DOJ investigators in 2020. And his answers to the questions are remarkable. This is probably the defining case of his career, yet he doesn't remember this, doesn't remember that. It's unfathomable that he said that he didn't know that there were so many victims. I mean, how could he have not known that? At one point, he is calling the victims women, and the investigator from the Justice Department had to take him to task and say, wait a minute, you keep saying women. These were 13 and 14-year-olds, right? There were so many nuances to the questioning and how he answered them that I think that almost in itself tells a story.
And there were some missing binders of evidence, an 11-month gap in Acosta's incoming emails that coincided with the time frame that Epstein's deal was being negotiated. He blames that on a technical glitch.
Well, there were a lot of technical glitches, it seems, during this case. So these are the reasons why a lot of people are suspicious and skeptical of the way this case was handled back then, because now we're finding out that there were glitches, that there were constant reminders that Epstein had his finger on these prosecutors. He tried to get dirt on all of them. He investigated the police chief. He hired private investigators to follow the victims.
This is known.
This is all known. It was all part of my original series in the Miami Herald in 2018. Epstein had a playbook to basically try to corrupt everybody that he came in contact with in order to get away with his crimes.
Mm-hmm. So, Trump. We know he and Epstein were friends. There has been lots of speculation about whether the files would contain evidence of Trump's involvement in, or at least knowledge of, Epstein's crimes. Buried in the middle of this latest batch was a summary of one tip phoned into the FBI about Trump's involvement with Epstein's activities. Unverified, but horrifying. After this tip sheet was released, it mysteriously disappeared. After multiple outlets like Midas Touch and Bellingcat, which copied it, shared the tip sheet, it suddenly reappeared in the documents. The DOJ calls the accusations sensationalist and untrue. Sensationalist, yeah. But how would they know that it was untrue? It doesn't seem like the FBI ever followed up.
Look, anybody that is in law enforcement and does investigations knows that you get crazy tips. That doesn't mean you ignore them. If I ignored every crazy tip that I got as a journalist, I wouldn't be sitting where I am right now. And I'm not saying this tip involving Trump is true. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying it was up to the FBI and the Justice Department to nevertheless investigate them, no matter how strange they sounded. And I'll tell you why. I've interviewed a lot of these victims. They have been traumatized unbelievably. And some of their memories are twisted, okay? And this is why these cases are very hard to successfully prosecute, quite frankly. But especially if they were very young when they were sexually abused, their stories change. They remember things later that they didn't remember back then. They're traumatized. I have found that while parts of some of these women's stories didn't add up, the key parts of the story added up. And this is common. I've talked to FBI experts who interview children that have been abused, and they say this is very, very common. The children misremember things. They say this happened here, and it didn't happen there. It happened somewhere else, things like that.
And you say that there were, 302 victim interviews, and in the papers there are no FBI notes. There are no transcripts of interviews. You can't see any evidence that they were addressed in any way?
No, I haven't found them yet. But remember, there are 3 million documents here. Sometimes I feel like we find things just by accident. But my guess is no, I just don't think they did. I never thought that authorities took this, with a couple of exceptions. The Palm Beach Police Department did their job, but the state attorney and the Justice Department completely failed these victims. And as a result of their real incompetence, hundreds of other young women and possibly even girls were subjected to sexual assault and rape.
Now, with regard to this tip sheet, you noted several similarities within these unverified accounts.
Well, one of the patterns that we're seeing is that at the time that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were chummy and doing a lot of partying together, there were these model parties. They were at Epstein's mansion in New York, and they were also at Mar-a-Lago. And we're learning every day new information about these parties. That Epstein is sending women to these model parties. Because remember, Epstein's way of entrapping these girls and young women, at least in the early 90s, was to say, I'm going to make you famous. I know people in the modeling industry. You should go to this party at Mar-a-Lago. So, some of these tips are from women that say, I went to a model party, either at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion or at Mar-a-Lago, and I was raped. My experience is most of these women who have had this horrible thing happen to them, they don't really want to come out about it because it subjects them to all kinds of ridicule. My experience is they're not making this stuff up. Now, are there people out there that are disturbed that are doing that? Probably. But that's my point. You still have to investigate.
What about Katie Johnson? That's a pseudonym.
Well, she had filed a lawsuit against Epstein and Trump in 2016, quite detailed. It included affidavits for 2 other people that supported her story, although those 2 people went by pseudonyms as well. And she was about to go public. She did do some media interviews, very few. Then there was a press conference called days before the 2016 election. She says that she had received threats and she just backed out, and we have never really heard another thing about her since. So it's hard to know. There's some evidence that her story was possibly manipulated by political operatives who were anti-Trump in the run-up to the 2016 election. That, of course, hurt her credibility. But it's really important to know that just because some political operatives took advantage of her doesn't mean that her entire story was false.
She never said that she lied.
No.
And as you say, that's why we have the FBI.
That's right. And I don't see any evidence, by the way, that the FBI ever spoke to her.
Do you expect anything Trump-related will emerge from 1 million of these documents once you go through them?
I just don't think we're going to find out anything about him because I think that they were scrubbed. And I'm not saying he's guilty of anything. These files were probably scrubbed, so I don't think we're going to find out unless there was a mistake made. It was clear that that tips document, it was a mistake that they let that out because they grabbed it back right away.
It was too late, yeah.
That should be telling right there that they must have missed it.
In this recent release of papers, which I know you've been going through page by page, is there anything that you would direct listeners to that might affect what they think about this case or why they should think about it at all?
There is evidence of corruption on the part of public officials or former public officials. You know, maybe there are people that don't understand the case as well as I do. I know all these people. Epstein kind of emailed in code sometimes, but I could figure out what he's saying. And he had some of these people probably on his payroll in one way or another. And I'm seeing lots of evidence of that.
Some high-profile people lost their jobs. Maxwell is serving a 20-year prison sentence. In terms of accountability, to me, this seems like pretty weak tea, with so many participants, so many dubious investigations. What about we as a public? How should we feel?
Right now, I think that everyone in the public should be writing every single one of their elected officials and demanding that this case not go away, that they stop politicizing it. This is a crime against children. And every single person in this country should be demanding that they start treating this case the way they should have in the beginning. And anybody who was involved or who helped Epstein by cutting him a deal needs to be looked at. All their bank accounts should be looked at. And the only way that that's going to happen is if the public demands it.
For many of our listeners, the worst facts of this story, the serial sexual assault, rape, sex trafficking of girls and young women, it's been known for a while. For listeners who have tuned this story out over the years, maybe because it's too awful, maybe because it involves such a vast group of powerful people, it almost feels like a conspiracy theory. What would you say is the importance in tuning back in?
Well, that's a very good question because everybody, including myself, we're very exhausted from all the bad news that's happening right now in our country and in our world. Even myself, I sometimes have to just put the covers over my head because it's too much, it's too loud, it's too disturbing. But I always get out of bed and I keep going because if we let this case slide and all the people that helped him get away with this slide, it means we don't care about the most vulnerable people in our society. And that, to me, goes against everything our country has stood for.
You say that you've been flooded with tips during the latest round of coverage. These are victims?
Some. They're mostly people. It's kind of cool in a way. There are all these, I don't know what you call them, citizen journalists or something. A lot of them are lawyers that are fascinated by this story, and they're all digging into the files because they're online. So one of the biggest tips I just got, somebody found an email. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I'm working on the story. They sent it to me, and I'm like, oh, my God. I'm getting a lot of people simply just sending me things that they see in the files. I welcome that because you never know. I might not have seen it. Everybody keep digging. Send me stuff.
What does it feel like to be focused on this story for so long? Does it drag you down?
It does at times, but then I'm really excited today because I just discovered a bunch of stuff and I'm like, yes, I thought that this person was doing something wrong,
But what happens then? Earlier in this story, Epstein weaseled out of charges. Now you have a Justice Department that is highly unlikely to bring any charges unless they're Democrats. Do you see accountability around the corner?
I don't know. To be honest with you, everybody says the lists and all these wealthy men that were involved. To me, I think the Justice Department should look at all these prosecutors back in Florida. Think about it. If they had put him in prison back then, we wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Right.
I think that's what's lost here. Going after the men, yes, we should do that too, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we were failed by our criminal justice system years ago.
Julie, thank you very much.
Sure.
Julie K. Brown is an investigative journalist, and she's been reporting on the Epstein Files since 2017. She has a Substack newsletter, The Epstein Files, by Julie K. Brown. This is On the Media.
La Brega is back. This season, we're spending time with the people and symbols that represent Puerto Rico.
We're proud Boricuas. And what does that mean?
And we are still in the fight.
Espérate, esto no es mío, esto es del pueblo.
We're telling stories about champions from a place worth fighting for. Stories that will inspire you no matter where you're from.
Como que el corazón, como que, wow.
This is La Brega Campeones. Listen early and ad-free with Futuro Plus.
This is On the Media. I'm Brooke Gladstone. Is this Bad Bunny week or what? Last Sunday, the Puerto Rican reggaeton singer won the Grammy for Album of the Year, the first for an all-Spanish release. And this Sunday, he's headlining the Super Bowl. So it's a perfect week for the launch of Season 3 of a podcast that On the Media had a hand in creating, La Brega, a show produced by Futuro Media about Puerto Rican history and life in the U.S. colony. Every episode is produced in English and Spanish, and it's hosted by our former On the Media colleague, Alana Casanova-Burgess. Episode 1 tells the story of a statue of a Spanish colonizer in old San Juan. A statue that, of course, tells one particular story about Puerto Rico's colonial past. A few years ago, activists tore that statue down, hoping to start a conversation about Puerto Rico's colonial present. That didn't go so well. Alana takes it from here.
It wasn't just any Monday morning in Puerto Rico. It was January 24th, 2022. And there was a lot of anticipation. For one thing, kids in Puerto Rico were going back to in-person classes, even though the pandemic was still in full swing. Some students hadn't been in a classroom for 2 years because of the earthquakes in the South. And also, on this Monday, the king was coming.
El rey Felipe VI viene a la isla con motivo de la celebración de los 500 años de la ciudad capital de San Juan.
The actual king of Spain. Felipe Juan Pablo Alfonso de Todos los Santos de Borbón y Grecia, or King Felipe VI, was coming to celebrate the 500th anniversary of the founding of San Juan. His visit had been postponed from the year before, and the press was poised to cover 3 carefully choreographed days of meetings. They had the official schedule, and they were ready to tell us about it.
Donde se realizarán los actos protocolares.
Los actos protocolares.
Como parte de los actos protocolares, habrá una transmisión simultánea.
Those actos protocolares, all of that pomp and circumstance, were in service of a bigger goal, according to TV analysts. Now, as a U.S. colony, Puerto Rico can't go around making trade deals with other countries. But the king was coming with Spain's Minister of Commerce. So talking heads on TV, like a former governor, kept saying the visit could spell investment for Puerto Rico. You know, deals, deals, deals.
El mundo entero que a través de la visita del rey nos ve, diga, a esa casa se puede entrar, en ese lugar podemos invertir.
So the stakes were high when we woke up that Monday morning, logged onto Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, and saw photos nobody was expecting. According to police, the statue of the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de León in Old San Juan had been vandalized sometime around 4:30 a.m., although vandalized seemed like an understatement. In photos, we could see this green, bearded sculpture lying on the ground, face up next to his white pedestal. He was broken in 2. Ponce's legs had come off from his body just below his medieval puffy shorts. Part of his base had come off too, so he was surrounded by chunks of rubble. The real Ponce de León had been appointed by Spain as the first governor of Puerto Rico in 1509. His statue had been pointing south, perhaps towards the original capital city, Caparra, with his other hand on his hip. But on the ground, it looked like the statue was holding his finger up in the air, as if he wanted to say just one more thing before everyone stopped listening. He looked small.
¿Qué pasó? ¿Quién hizo esto? ¿Por qué?
For many media commentators, like talk radio show host Ruben Sanchez on WKAQ, the big reaction was horror, shock, dismay. The statue, he told Mayor Miguel Romero, had been there since he was a little boy.
Eso está allí desde que yo soy chiquito.
But actually, it had been up in that plaza since the 1890s, right off the famous Calle San Sebastián, next to the Church of San Jose. the same church that King Felipe was scheduled to visit the very next day. The mayor had the royal plane's arrival time at his fingertips.
Entonces, ¿a qué hora usted espera a Felipe?
Pasada entre 5:45 a 5:50 debería estar llegando aquí a Puerto Rico, Rubén.
Sometime between 5:45 and 5:50 that very afternoon.
A lo mejor el rey ni cuenta se da de ese tipo de cosas.
Perhaps, the mayor said, the monarch doesn't even notice these kinds of things. Maybe the protest wasn't even about the royal visit. But it absolutely was. Even before 7 a.m., a group called the Fuerzas Libertarias de Boriquén had taken responsibility for pulling the statue down. They hadn't been heard of before, and they haven't been heard of since. But the message was, no kings and no gringo invaders. They were linking Ponce de León, a symbol of Spanish colonialism, to people from the United States moving to Puerto Rico for tax incentives, displacing Puerto Ricans. Whoever was behind the group, they had gotten everyone's attention.
I immediately called a friend and we came here, like really, really early, just sort of to see it. I needed to see this statue on the ground.
Rafael Capó Garcia leads Memoria de Colonial, a group that gives counter-narrative history tours.
It was me and probably 3 other people interested in what had happened. And then you had the press, you had municipal employees outraged with how you could deface this monument.
Rafael already knew the statue really well. He used to be a high school history teacher, and he'd bring his students to Old San Juan for field trips, teaching them to question whether violent colonizers were really heroes and champions who deserved to be on a pedestal. So when he saw Ponce de León lying on the ground, he felt hopeful?
I was hopeful. I was excited that we were going to finally have these conversations, much-needed conversations.
But that conversation about who really represents Puerto Ricans and Puerto Rican-ness, it didn't seem like there was going to be time for it to happen. Because by 8:30 a.m., Mayor Romero had already made a promise in interviews. He sounded confident, even breezy, standing next to the empty pedestal, speaking with a reporter from El Nuevo Día.
¿Le han dado un estimado de cuánto tardaría en que esté?
Bueno, el estimado es que durante el día de hoy se va a estar trabajando y la colocamos hoy mismo.
He expected the statue to be back up that very same day.
So the municipal government had to hustle to get this statue up because in their minds, they couldn't allow the King of Spain to visit San Juan and see this symbol of Spanish heritage on the ground.
Did you think that they would be able to do it?
I didn't think they would be able to do it because the statue was broken in half. Imagine, it takes them forever to fix a pothole, right?
It was actually Mayor Romero who acknowledged the pothole problem that morning. The city would have to spend public funds on fixing the statue, he lamented, instead of on fixing a pothole. There are some potholes in Puerto Rico that are old enough to have birthday parties, but the city was going to go ahead and try to repair Juan Ponce de León in less than a day. It felt ridiculous. Online, people were coping with the absurdity the usual way, with memes.
I saw it at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and I just started brainstorming.
Juan Pablo Diaz, who goes by Juanpi, is a political satirist and actor. He wanted to get something out about the statue really quickly.
I thought, I can do a parody of a song because the music is already there. I just had to change the words. Is the King of Spain? What is a good song, a good recognizable song? The statue is broke, partido, corazón partido, Alejandro Sanz. Let's go. Su majestad me va a ver así de ¿quién me va a arreglar si amanecí partido? Buena forma de acabar este mes de enero. Y como este bochorno sobreviviremos, la tienes ahí, dime.
Su majestad me va a ver.
Su majestad me va a ver.
Juanpi also rigged a Bitmoji to look like a green-bearded Ponce de Leon, singing along to the song.
¿Cómo van a recordar ahora el colonialismo?
There's a particular line he wrote. The statue sings, "You all know that nothing will be the same without me. How will you remember colonialism?" It's a punch, because in Puerto Rico, nobody needs a statue to remember colonialism. It's not in the past. And so far, around 500 years of Puerto Rico's colonial past and present were being crammed into one single day. More and more layers were revealing themselves as the hours ticked by. Potholes, earthquakes, tax incentives, the literal king of Spain.
I think Puerto Ricans laugh to get less pissed off.
And actually, the more Juanpi remembered the day with me, the more pissed off he got.
Eso fue un papeloncito. Ahora me estoy empezando a acordar de cosas.
He remembered that the coverage was taking the vandalism of the statue so seriously, as though it was a national catastrophe.
Esa noticia se trató como si hubiese sido, olvídate, es el desastre, la catástrofe nacional.
And there was a disconnect between the way the government and the press were handling the story and the anger and mockery that we were seeing online. There were Valentine's Day cards, like "You knock me over like Ponce de Leon," and jokes about the statue being too high to get up off the floor at a party, asking someone to get him a sandwich. People were playing with the idea of honoring other, more deserving figures instead, photoshopping Boricuas like Iris Chacon and Bad Bunny up on Ponce de Leon's old spot. Because the thing is, in Puerto Rico, there's no shortage of people who deserve to be honored on a pedestal. If you ask around Old San Juan, or even in that same square, Plaza San Jose, you'll hear so many better options than Juan Ponce de Leon.
Any other person, honestly. But yeah, I just won't like to see him.
Baseball players, musicians, poets.
Pues Roberto Clemente.
Mi cantante favorito, sí, Teco Calderón.
Julia de Burgos, tremenda poeta, escritora, un orgullo para la mujer.
Boxers, independence activists, Ricky Martin. I heard creative responses, ideas for things that aren't even human, like a tree or a goddess.
Puede ser un árbol, una ceiba, a la diosa de la fertilidad taína, a Tabey.
I heard enthusiasm, to the point of yelling.
Una mujer, por favor.
And I heard the names of tons of talented and distinguished Boricuas.
Pero hay un montón.
Icons who inspire so much devotion.
Pues como que el corazón como que, wow.
Growing up, my mother would point out Puerto Ricans everywhere. She still does.
Hi, I just wanted to tell you that I saw the Jimmy Fallon show and I heard the Pleneros de la Cresta. Did you know they're from Ciales?
I can't remember my English father ever leaning over to celebrate someone's Englishness. But in Puerto Rico and its diaspora, we have a thing for people representing the archipelago, competing for it or championing it in some way. What does it mean, and what does it take to champion Puerto Rico as a nation, unflinchingly and with boundless pride? Perhaps this is why the events of January 24th, 2022 felt and feel so absurd, because there was an empty pedestal just sitting there and a pantheon of heroes to fill it. And yet, the government insisted it should be Ponce de Leon up there, and that they could resurrect his statue in just a day. And the hours were ticking by. So coming up after the break, remember, 5 hours to go until the king arrives. This is La Brega.
WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
La Brega is back. This season, we're spending time with the people and symbols that represent Puerto Rico.
We're proud Boricuas. And what does that mean?
And we're still in the fight.
Espérate, esto no es mío, esto es del pueblo.
We're telling stories about champions from a place worth fighting for. Stories that will inspire you no matter where you're from.
Como que el corazón, como que, wow.
This is La Brega Campeones. Listen early and ad-free with Futuro Plus.
This is On the Media. I'm Brooke Gladstone. We're listening to episode 1 of the new season of La Brega, about the toppling of a statue and what happened next. Here's Alana.
By 1 p.m., a city crew had removed the statue of Ponce de Leon, or the two pieces of it, from the plaza. No one knew the whereabouts of the shattered colonizer, but with 5 hours left until the king's arrival, we got a glimpse. Someone, it seemed likely that it was a municipal employee, had recorded an 8-second video that I can only describe as art. The opening frame shows one of those blue quilted blankets people use to protect precious cargo. A left hand pulls the fabric back and reveals
Al Señor
Ponce de Leon's face.
Ponce de Leon.
And gives him a short, swift slap. It's hard to keep a straight face, even just remembering the video. It has derailed our editorial meetings and makes it hard to even record these lines. The comedic timing is impeccable, but it's also deep. In life, Ponce de Leon was a violent conquistador. As a statue, he was glorified on an adorned pedestal. But now, he was broken in two and casually slapped. That's not to say everyone agreed. It's typical, when a controversial monument is vandalized, for some people to see it as an affront to heritage and an effort to rewrite history. And there were people who certainly felt that way and were offended. Online, there were arguments in comment sections and on Facebook posts about what the statue really represented.
Bueno, mi impresión es lamentable.
The director of the Museum of San Juan was giving voice to that reaction in interviews.
Estamos ante un atentado contra el patrimonio artístico y cultural del pueblo de Puerto Rico, una estatua que está en esta plaza.
And that's because Juan Ponce de Leon isn't only a person who existed and who enslaved and killed indigenous people and Africans. He's also a symbol of Spanish heritage and part of a conversation about what it means to be Puerto Rican and who represents our origins. And the statue of him isn't just any monument. It says a lot. And I mean that literally.
Yo, Juan Ponce de León, colonizador y primer gobernador de la isla de Puerto Rico.
There's a short film from 1957 that was made by the Puerto Rican government and narrated by the statue. It tells the story of the Spanish conquest.
Aquí mi estatua, en una tranquila plazoleta.
It's a real rewriting of history, with only scant acknowledgement of any violence. The last line makes a big claim. The people of Puerto Rico are a tree, and he, Ponce de Leon, is the root.
Pueblo puertorriqueño, árbol del cual yo, Juan Ponce de León, soy la raíz.
If the actual statue could really talk, it would tell a much more complicated story about Puerto Rican identity. Rafael Capó has written about it extensively.
The earliest mention that I found was in 1877. A journalist in the conservative newspaper El Boletín Mercantil mentioned how Puerto Rico needed to honor its conquistador, right? And he mentioned that just like in Mexico, Hernán Cortés was the Mexican Moses, right, who was venerated by all, Ponce de Leon should receive the same treatment in Puerto Rico.
4 years later, there's another newspaper report about the statue. It has been made in New York and is arriving in San Juan. And the material is notable. It's made from 2 bronze cannons that had been used to defend Puerto Rico from a failed invasion by the British in 1797. This is one of the defining moments in Puerto Rican history. when Sir Ralph Abercrombie attacked San Juan with a massive fleet and thousands of soldiers.
The people that defend Puerto Rico are not just Spanish soldiers.
Black Puerto Ricans, Creoles, whites, men, women, everyone came together to fight off the British. And many historians say that this is the moment that the Puerto Rican nation was created. So when the statue was put up in 1882, those who had pushed for it were celebrating a connection to Spain with this other element baked in.
For me, the statue and Hispanic heritage has always been really interesting because of how it sort of has become, not so much now, but it definitely during the 20th century when the U.S. was trying to Americanize Puerto Ricans, a lot of them sought refuge in Hispanicity.
It was a way of saying, we aren't Americans.
We are something else, and rooting themselves in European and Hispanic, Spanish heritage was sort of a defensive mechanism.
Being Spanish was special, different. For example, there's a debate that comes up in 1908 for the 400th anniversary of Ponce de Leon arriving in Puerto Rico.
The official historian of Puerto Rico, Cayetano Colitoste, is adamant that Juan Ponce de Leon has his own national holiday. He's a hero in Puerto Rico. And he specifically mentions, and I love this quote, he says, hopefully all conquistadors of the Indies would have been as benevolent as Juan Ponce de Leon was with the indigenous peoples of Puerto Rico.
This is simply not true.
Because it's always that Puerto Rico is an exception, right? That we are somehow devoid of racism because in our historical origins, thanks to Spanish civilization, we were conceived through mixture and tolerance from the beginning. And this narrative is always constructed by positing that there is an other that is racist and refuses to mix. And those are the British, and that is the United States.
So at some point, though, you get up on the pedestal.
So the getting up on the pedestal was not the plan.
It was around 2 p.m., a little less than 4 hours before the King of Spain was slated to arrive in Puerto Rico on this fateful day. Municipal workers had been readying the base to receive the repaired statue. One of them had left a ladder.
He put a ladder there and he left. And I looked at my friend and I was like, well, it.
And when Rafael got up there, he did the Ponce de Leon pose. A finger in the air and a hand on the hip.
Tan pronto me paré allá arriba, algo me dijo, haz la pose. Como que si ya estás aquí, haz la f***ing pose.
Were you trolling them a little bit?
I was definitely trolling. I had no intention of staying the entire day. And yeah, I stayed there maybe for an hour.
It was long enough to make some news that a protester had delayed the installation of the statue. They took it very seriously.
Hubo una manifestación que lo impidió cuando un hombre se trepó al pedestal.
After Rafael's pose, some other protesters started arriving. It was getting close to the deadline.
I didn't know how it was going to end.
Laura Perez is a journalist based in San Juan and an editor for La Brega. She had been reporting for a wire service that day and had been in the plaza for nearly 5 hours.
At some point, I realized that there were policemen walking into the plaza. They were wearing riot gear and they were, intimidating.
It was 4:45, an hour to go.
People actually started screaming at them. And what they were saying, something I've heard before in this kind of circumstances. How come you don't answer the call when my safety is at risk? But how come is it that you're here now when I'm protesting?
The riot police marched forward, forcing people out of their way and forming a line around the pedestal, creating space for the municipal workers who had just arrived with the repaired statue.
When they started trying to get Juan Ponce de Leon out of the pickup, that's when I realized, this is heavy and this is not an easy task.
Municipal workers brought a couple of cherry pickers with them. They're like a small crane with a basket on the end. They had wrapped yellow straps around the now intact statue, so it looked like Ponce was wearing a ziplining harness. He was hanging from a crane while workers in the baskets and on the ground tried to position him on the pedestal. There was a live stream, so we could all watch through splayed fingers.
All of a sudden, the statue is like flying in the middle of the square. And he's just flying, but like he's crooked, not like a superhero that knows how to fly.
He was at an angle, as though he was really ziplining, and they couldn't quite place him as he swung around.
And I'm not sure that they know what they're doing.
An hour went by.
It seemed that they were just improvising. They were just trying to make it work with whatever materials and tools they have for whatever it is that they do for a living, which is not putting statues back up on a pedestal. I'm sure about that.
Because the top part of the pedestal had also crashed down that morning, the base was now shorter, and there didn't seem to be an easy way to install the statue.
And they had to put it back down, and then Ponce de Leon was again lying on the floor of the square where the day started.
And meanwhile, in the live feed from the airport,
Ya está bajando el rey Felipe VI. O está por bajar.
The king's plane had landed a few minutes early at 5:35.
Ahí lo vemos acompañado del gobernador de Puerto Rico.
It was an unforgettable spectacle. A split screen with the king on one side getting a red carpet welcome and the conquistador statue on the other, swinging from yellow nylon straps. The audience was Puerto Rico, even though it seemed like the show had been put on for someone else.
We're always thinking about what others think of us, but not what we think of ourselves. That's Puerto Rico.
It was just before 7 p.m. when the bronze statue of Juan Ponce de Leon was finally reinstalled, with his legs attached to his body and his finger pointing to the south. The king had yet to drive past the site. But something was wrong. The statue leaned to the left, like a lot.
You couldn't, in good faith, stand back and look up at that pedestal and say, Juan Ponce de Leon is standing tall and proud and straight, you know?
Adrián Florido is a reporter at NPR who covers race and identity in the U.S. And when I told him I was starting this season with this story, he remembered a recording he had made for his side project, documenting Puerto Rico in sound.
A lot of times when you're recording and documenting, you don't know what it means yet. And I think that's true of what happened with the Ponce de Leon statue.
Adrián had followed the movement to remove statues of Confederate generals and other figures, and this moment of reflection that a lot of communities around the world had had about their monuments.
Who are our heroes? You know, like, who are we honoring? Let's put the statue in a warehouse for a while till we decide what to do with it. A lot of places said, no, we're not putting that back up. It doesn't represent our values anymore. Other places have left the pedestals just blank and empty, you know, which forces a conversation about what used to be there and what isn't there now, and maybe what should be there. And maybe there aren't answers to that question necessarily. But it forces people at the very least to reflect on it.
That clearly wasn't happening here. There just wasn't going to be time to discuss what this particular statue says about Puerto Ricanness, or Puerto Rico. Adrián got there just after it had been reinstalled, and there were protesters heckling and pointing out that, yes, the statue was most definitely crooked. And he spoke with the director of public works for San Juan, Raúl García.
Raúl García, director de operaciones y ornatos del municipio de San Juan.
I asked him, did you put it up the way it was before? Like, this looks, people are saying it looks a little crooked.
Está en el lugar exacto, en la posición exacta, porque muchos de los que estaban protestando ahora mismo les parece que como que quedó un poco chueco o algo así, virado.
Virado is the word that Puerto Ricans use. Chueco is the word that we Mexicans use.
Algo así, virado. Está en el lugar exacto y en la posición exacta que le corresponde.
He said, we put it back up exactly the way that it should be.
Le falta un poco el pedestal, pero ciertamente es un asunto ya de construcción que estaremos trabajando más adelante.
He says the pedestal is missing, but that they'd be fixing it soon.
I was curious to know whether he'd had the conversation with anybody about whether that was the right decision to make, given what was happening in other places where these sorts of statues had been toppled.
Aquí hay una estatua que está desde el siglo XIX colocada. y sencillamente tomamos la determinación de colocar en el lugar que le corresponde.
This is a statue that has been here since the 19th century. Of course we were going to put it back up.
It's not a political situation. It's just simply that the administration decided to put it back up.
Tampoco hubo conversación sobre si se debería revaluar la estatua. No hubo esa conversación.
Did you talk about this?
Esa conversación no la tuvimos.
He said no.
Sencillamente el Instituto de Cultura nos pidió
without hesitation. Like, of course not.
We asked the municipal government for an interview and for comment, and they did not respond. The king did make a visit to the church next to the statue during his visit, but he didn't walk past it. It seems unlikely that he saw it at all, given how far away his driver parked. We'll never know if the King of Spain noticed the tiny, crooked colonizer, but frankly, I don't think most people care if he saw it or not. 4 years later, Ponce de Leon is still slanted. The city never did fix the pedestal, so the effect is that the statue is leaning to the left and is also lower to the ground. Knocked down a peg, literally. It's telling a different story than it used to. I've heard a lot of fantasies about what could happen next. What if Ponce de Leon keeps leaning and just crashes to the ground again? And then what? If the bronze from the cannons that the statue is made out of is so important to a story about Puerto Rican identity, what if it were melted down and forged into a new monument? Who would we replace him with? What story would that tell? Or what if the pedestal were left empty, to invite us to reflect on who actually represents us? What would we learn about Puerto Ricanness if we really had that conversation about who has championed Puerto Rico and who our heroes are? So we're going to do just that.
Season 3 of La Brega is all about Puerto Rican champions. New episodes will be released every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And that's the show. On the Media is produced by Molly Rosen, Rebecca Clark-Callender, and Candice Huang. Travis Mannon is our video producer. Our technical director is Jennifer Munson, with engineering from Jared Paul. Eloise Blondio is our senior producer, and our executive producer is Katya Rogers. On the Media is produced by WNYC. Micah Lowinger will be back next week. I'm Brooke Gladstone.
Since WNYC's first broadcast in 1924, we've been dedicated to creating the kind of content we know the world needs. In addition to this award-winning reporting, your sponsorship also supports inspiring storytelling and extraordinary music that is free and accessible to all. To get in touch and find out more, visit sponsorship.wnyc.org.